Okay? So we're barreling ahead here. We're picking up where we left off, and we're going to be moving into the 19th century rather quickly here. We were looking, so any questions on that? Is that all pretty clear? Right? They're all up on Canvas, and I'll take anything back to 16th century Italy, which I think is worksheet 5, through whatever the most recent due date is on Canvas, as of today. Right? Okay, so we were looking at neoclassicism, a movement in French art, actually all over Europe, that we looked at examples in France, in England, in America, right? We saw numerous examples everywhere. Coming out of the Enlightenment, its focus on rationality, an emphasis on humans' ability to use reasoning, right, gave rise to this movement that focuses on periods of great rationality and using that rationality to become better citizens. This is like it's still a good lesson today. And one of the things that we're entering into when we look at Jacques-Louis David, neoclassicism, and onward through the 19th century, and into the 20th as well, is a growing sort of social engagement on the part of the artists. You know, they're not just making art for princes and kings and the church, right, with some spiritual message or something that makes the duke feel better about himself. But these are works of art that have a strong social conscience. And the artist believes that this is really an important thing for all of us, right? One of the things we hope that you get out of a Marymount education, out of any higher education, is the idea that the knowledge that you're building for yourself will make you a better participant in society as we know it, a more informed citizenry. And our artists here are really taking that to heart. They're making works of art that are meant to address social issues. And so with David's Oath of the Hierarchy, it takes up this idea of the exemplum virtutis that we talked about before, the example of virtue derived from Roman history, again, a period of great rationality, right? But meant as a lesson for today, right? That there are some things that are worth bonding together as a unit, as a group, to fight for despite your own personal desires. There are some things worth sacrificing from yourself, that are better for the community rather than for your own personal gain or personal desires. That's sort of picked up by the women in the lower right corner. And the relationship of this to contemporary events was understood by David. The Oath of the Sons of Horatius was painted prior to the French Revolution. So it's certainly tapping into ideas that were in the spirit of that period. And then after the Revolution in 1789, it was displayed again, a second time. Each of these were in the French salons, right, the annual shows of French Royal Academy members, sponsored by the French Royal Academy. So it's first shown in the Salon of 1785, and then shown again in the Salon of 1789, immediately after the Revolution, the storming of the Bastille, right, where the revolutionaries swore to fight unto death for freedom. And these two were shown side by side. The one on the right was going to be a massive, 25-foot across painting, all the figures life-sized. Never finished it. Big surprise, right? But he has the sketch for it, the oath that they're taking on an indoor tennis court. And you can see in the upper left corner, right here, three figures whose basic poses mirror the Oath of the Hierarchy, right? And this is the whole point of an exemplum virtutis, is that lessons learned from history can become examples for proper decision-making, good citizenry of today, right? So again, after the French Revolution, this was then displayed. Now, we've talked about all this before, we're kind of recapping, but it has been a while. since we've seen each other. Neoclassicism comes out of Enlightenment, right? It really is directly related to the Enlightenment. But it's propagated in France by Napoleon, who likes neoclassicism for his own purposes. A nice portrait by David of Napoleon downtown at the National Gallery, where we see him in his studio in the classic Napoleon pose. I talk more about this in a art fix that's coming up tomorrow online. I'll let you know when that's up, sort of how to read this picture and how it fits in with David's career, which traces the career of French political history very, very tightly, right? So Napoleon grew out of the French Revolution. It gave rise to Napoleon almost directly. And he, after becoming emperor, right, the French, they got rid of the kings. They got an emperor instead, right? But regardless, right, after he became emperor, he wanted neoclassicism to continue into the 19th century. And for him, it was important to propaganda, in that for him, neoclassicism, works that were sponsored by Napoleon would be neoclassical. They would look Roman or Greek. For him, this was important because he's the new emperor. And he wanted his public monuments, like the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, to look like ancient Roman monuments, reborn, neoclassicism, right? So many of our most prominent 19th century monuments that look very much like Roman examples are due to Napoleon almost single-handedly keeping neoclassicism alive throughout the course of his reign in France into the early part of the 19th century. Yeah. Now we're going to look at one other neoclassical artist today before we move off into the next art movement, the next ism, if you will, Romanticism. But as we're talking about neoclassicism, we're going to look at the artist Ingres. The R-E-S is really all but silent, right? Unless you're good at French, and my wife speaks it, and I suck at it, right? But the R-E-S is really all but silent, right? Not Ingres, but Ingres, right? So as if it were spelled like A-N-G, right? Is the best way to pronounce it in English. He was a pupil of David's. And in fact, in 1801, he's a very young student, enters a work in the annual Salon of the Royal Academy. He wins that big prize, the Prix de Rome. We talked about this before, right? So remember the Royal Academy. I'm just going to abbreviate it, RA, right? The Royal Academy, okay, has an annual Salon, which is where artists who belong to the Royal Academy will exhibit their works. It's jury, right? Not everything gets in, right? And the jurors can be trapped as quick, you know? Sometimes more than half of the works are okay, right? And they can also be a little old school. They don't much like avant-garde art. They like things that are really traditional, right? And artists want to make it flashy, flawed. There's a lot of people. As long as everybody is tapped in to these things, it begins to think to be cool, you know? There's a big event on the zodiac calendar, and so artists often try to make the biggest plastic by taking immense pictures, just blow people away with just the size of it, right? And try to pull all the stuff. And part of pulling all the stuff was that the Royal Academy offered prizes, right? And the most prestigious prize, these single most prestigious prizes, called the Rome Prize, or the Prix de Rome. Right? The Prix de Rome was given to using artists with great promise, so they tend to be younger, but not always. And it was to help their career. And what it was they always sent this day trip to Rome to study ancient monuments for 2 years. Nice. Nice, huh? What do we get? I mean, you might have to work in this RA and get some tuition. years, all expenses paid, Rome, and the whole idea, because it's neoclassical, it's the reigning style, right? The whole idea is to go down to Roman monuments, right? Studying antiquity, right? The great collections of the popes, the Renaissance works, right? Michelangelo is just everything. It's supposed to go down and immerse yourself. In 1801, a young pupil of Jacques David never won it. And wins. It's a 2-year Rome prize, right? Goes to Rome and stays there for 20 years, right? He decides after the 2 years are up, there's enough people down here to work on a mid-sized career of working in Rome. And part of the reason behind that, part of his motivation was the fact that there were a lot of French people living in Rome at that time. Because Napoleon had conquered Italy prior to becoming emperor. In fact, it was triumphal return back from Italy, which was what kind of led to him being crowned emperor. So, France had colonized Italy, which meant there were a lot of people living in Italy for not only to speak French to, right, but to actually work for it, drum up income, which is what they need to stay on, right? Now, this idiot is made while he's living in Rome, right? And he's already been there for over 10 years, getting close to 15, right? Dozen years or so he's been in Rome by the time he paints this, right? Now, let's just coming up. There it is, Prix de Rome. I had an extra slide stuck in here I didn't need, so there we are. So he went to Prix de Rome 1801. He stayed on for 12 years, working for the numerous French who are living in Italy. This particular picture, which is up in the Walters Art Museum, right? Now that's way on the Spanish world. We've seen a lot of work from the National Gallery downtown, but there's other works within, 40-mile distance that are worth bringing into our conversation. This one was commissioned by Napoleon's sister, a woman named Caroline Murat, who, after Napoleon had conquered Italy, he had installed as the Queen of Naples, a region in southern Italy. Right? So this is one of the many expat French patrons for whom Eng is working. Right? So this is a commissioned piece for Napoleon's sister, the Queen of Naples. And this is typical Napoleon. When he conquers regions, he will install his family members as his basic puppet regime in these different regions. He does it in Italy, he'll do it in Spain. We'll see that later this afternoon. Okay? So Caroline Murat, the Queen of Naples, the sister of Napoleon, is the patron of this work. So even though everything is French about this so far, it's being actually done in Italy. Right? Now, the picture itself shows a totally fabricated piece of history. This is fake news. Right? This is a myth about Raphael that people believed in the 19th century, but simply there's no factual basis for it whatsoever. Right? So the story here is that this cardinal, Bibbiena, presented his young, beautiful daughter to the painter Raphael. There's Raphael on the left, Cardinal on the center, the daughter on the right. Presented her to Raphael to be married. Right? Now, Raphael wasn't married. He never married, right? But he did paint that guy in the middle. And he painted the girl as well. And this is what the basis of the myth was. So, here is Cardinal Bibbiena, a portrait by Raphael from 1516. And using the prizes of the Rome Prize, is down there studying these works. He sees all this in Florence. He goes to see it. And he uses it as the basis of his work. So again, as a neoclassical work, it's not looking back at ancient Rome, but it is looking back at the Italian Renaissance. It's a very, very classical period, right? So he modeled Cardinal Bibbiena after a Raphael, Cardinal Bibbiena. The daughter is another portrait by Raphael from the same year, also hanging in the same gallery in Florence. The nickname is La Fornarina, the baker's daughter, but that's probably not who she is. And the reason this myth rose up that there's nothing, she's not the daughter of Viviana either, right? That's just this romantic fabrication of the life of Raphael. But it was believed that she was Raphael's lover because not only did Raphael paint this portrait of her in these beautiful clothes, but he also painted her naked, right? So this is like, oh, well, there we go, and therefore she must be, he must have fallen in love with her as the model and got her to pose nude after they got married. And of course, none of this is supported by any facts anywhere, right? But this is what Aang's painting for us, right? Is this mythology about, he loves Raphael, right? Absolutely adores him. He's his go-to artist from the Italian Renaissance, right? And for his brand of neoclassicism, which is very tightly painted and very exacting and sort of sharply focused, Raphael's a good touchstone for that, right? So anyway, here's the cardinal is grabbing Raphael's hand, presenting his daughter to him. I'm not quite sure what's going on with the guy in the background. I've been trying to find that out, and I haven't yet. What the rest of the story is, some sort of palace intrigue going on back there, right? But what's more fascinating for us locally here in D.C. is that the portrait of Raphael, again, this is all made up, is based on a portrait that hangs in the National Gallery that in the 19th century they thought was a self-portrait of Raphael. We now know it's not. It's gorgeous. He's a painter, right? Didn't do alto easy. But you can see that our Raphael here is this picture, right? So he pulled in all these different Raphael pictures together, created this fabricated mythology about Raphael as part of his way of looking back to the past, right? Looking back to the classical past. It's all done while he's on the Prix de Rome. But again, none of it has any sort of factual basis whatsoever. Right? Another picture done while Aang was in Rome, and one that you may have seen in reproduction before, this makes it into perfume ads like all the time, right, is the Grand Odalisque in French. And again, it was a commissioned piece for the Queen of Naples, Caroline Murat, who he'd worked for with this picture on the left as well. So both of these were owned by the same person, right? And again, it shows the connections between Aang and the circle of Napoleon that's there in Italy after Napoleon conquers it and during the time that Napoleon is Emperor of France. Right? Now, let's see, I'm kind of doing this without my notes so much. Again, he's basing it on works of art that he's seen while he was down in Italy on this grand tour, specifically to study art. The most famous of the works that he seems to derive this from is this work by Titian, the Venus of Urbino, which was commissioned by the Duke of Urbino, probably just a prostitute. We call her Venus because it makes it so we don't have to be embarrassed looking at her, right? But she's most certainly just a courtesan. We've brought her flowers, and she's looking directly at us. It's fairly brazen. They've got her clothes in the background, so unlike Venus, who's always naked, this woman's supposed to be wearing clothes and isn't, right? And is looking directly at you. This is one of many works that Aang seems to pull together for the Grand Odalisque. He shifted it somewhat, right? She turns her back toward us, but still makes that direct eye contact as she looks directly out at us, right? Now, Aang's is different from the Venus of Urbino in that he doesn't show us a courtesan from contemporary Italy, where he was living, whereas that's what Titian is showing us. What he shows us instead, an odalisque, is the French term for a harem girl. A woman from North Africa, a member of a sultan's harem. Right? And so what we have here is a very, very privileged view. Because only the sultan could see the women in the harem. Outsiders were not allowed there. Now, Aang wasn't allowed there either, so he just sort of made it up again. Right? But it's meant to be this very privileged view of the inside of an exotic, oriental palace. And you can see, if you think about that, So the details of Aang include the headdress, the silk curtain on the right with the embroidered brocading on it, the jewels next to her hips, the fur, that ostrich feather fan. All of these things are meant to exoticize the image, right? To pull it away from contemporary Italy and stick it into this regional other world, right? And this interest in sort of the exotic Middle East began because of Napoleon. In the 1790s, as part of his moves through the Mediterranean region, what ended up netting him Italy in the first place, he also ended up invading Egypt, right? As well as much of what is today Palestine, Israel, Lebanon, right? We're all part of where he moved. And this exposure, right, to Middle Eastern culture inspired in French art a movement that we call Orientalism, which is this great interest. Orient means east is all, right? So Orientalism doesn't necessarily mean Asian. It means non-European, and east from there. So in this case, it's Middle Eastern. And we start to see furniture being made with sort of Egyptian motifs in it. We start to see the adoption of Islamic tile patterns, clothing patterns, beginning in the 1790s because of Napoleon's political moves through the Mediterranean region. So Aang's odalisque, after all of this, owes its subject matter and its interest in that subject matter to Napoleon and his invasions of the Middle East. I should also mention here that this interest in Orientalism, particularly in French art, does not go away deep into the 20th century. And it's compounded politically by the fact that, Napoleon's over and done with by 1815, right? So that's not even in the cards anymore. But the French are arch colonizers in the 19th century. And already in the 1820s, they are colonizing North Africa, particularly Algeria. And they remain in control as the colonial lords of Algeria all the way to the early 1960s. Right? There are early French New Wave films by Godard that are about the war for Algerian independence. Right? So the French have this interest in all things Middle Eastern, dating back to Napoleon and continuing through the 19th century. And it's worth mentioning because, I think we're in a period now where we can all kind of agree that colonization is not necessarily a good thing, importing your own values into a different culture because, those guys are just backwards and they need us. It's kind of fraught with problems and doesn't always work out all that well. These pictures are also not entirely innocuous because when we look at pictures that take on Middle Eastern themes, they almost always take on Middle Eastern themes that tend to show the people of the Middle East as not being anywhere near as civilized as the Europeans are. Now, she might be surrounded by incredibly luxurious stuff, but she is a piece of meat. She is a kept woman. She has no will of her own. And the Sultan, who owns the harem, is a bigamist. Right? He's a wanton sexual predator. They wouldn't have said sexual predator, but he's, healthy sexual appetite. Right? This is one of many women that he owns. It's very non-Western in its outlook. And these pictures aren't judging that at all. Right? They're part of that ideology that use images of others of non-Europeans to sort of establish a hierarchy, right? A status quo that said European culture is better. Middle Eastern culture has some growing up to do, if you would call it that, right? Some changing necessary. So there's something behind these images that's a little creepy in a way, right? They're really trying to reassert what is the ideology of the time. So, I didn't bring any details in. I've got some nice details of the pearls in her hair. Aang is interesting because many of his pictures have a lot of difficulty with human anatomy. And with this picture, if you try to trace the leg that crosses over the top, just sometimes I'm looking at that and trying to figure out how it works, right? Where not only how does this part of the thigh here hook up with that knee, but then if this is the other thigh, how does it reach that hip down there, right? Because it's going to have to come down here like this, but it seems to be going sort of in that direction. But at the same time, at some point down right away, it becomes it's all about the flesh, it's all about sort of subhuman surfaces, smell that he tried to recreate, the fan, the fur, the jewels, and the incense burner over here. But you see the incense coming up out of it, right? It's all about evoking all of the different senses here, the silks and the cottons and the linens, right? And the flesh, the softness of the flesh. Is what he's really focusing on, and almost losing it to a certain degree when it comes to his sense of anatomy. Right. Now, with that, we're going to leave neoclassicism behind, and we're going to start talking about another movement that runs parallel to this. And this movement, well, we'll get it up there in a second. One of the things that we've seen as we look at neoclassical art is that some of the pictures in neoclassicism are really rather dark. And I don't mean dark as in black and white, right? Dark tonality. I mean dark in mood. They're creepy and gory. Right? They show death. And clouds gathering over the head of General Wolfe. Nature as this force that can devour us, that's fearsome and frightening, right? Poor Brooke Watson, already missing a leg and staring deep into the mouth of death itself, the shark coming at him. We've seen a lot of pictures that have sort of haven't been particularly cheery. And these pictures point to a movement that runs parallel to neoclassicism, which is called Romanticism. And it's also very much an Enlightenment movement, but it's one that focuses more on these darker elements of human existence. And so some pictures might be labeled neoclassical but have romantic characteristics, or it might be labeled romantic and have neoclassical characteristics. Right? Both of them run side by side. Most of our movements, right, Rococo comes after Baroque. Neoclassicism comes after Rococo. These two run parallel. Right? Romanticism lasts a bit longer. Now, they're both Enlightenment inspired. In particular, for Romanticism, the philosopher of choice is Jean-Jacques Rousseau. We've talked about him before. He was the one that was really all over the idea of a tight family unit, of mothers taking a more direct role in their infant care. We saw it with Chardin, we saw it with Kaufman, where sort of women's roles in the family were meant to be more important. That came from Rousseau as well. But one of Rousseau's most famous quotes, one that inspires not only the American Revolution but the French Revolution, is that man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. Right? Man longs to be free, but he's everywhere in chains. And the Romantic movement, taking this as its principal touchstone, tries to emphasize mankind's freedom from constraints. Right? Tries to find those periods when man was free. Right? Not just longing to be free. Now, how do they do this? They don't just sort of show people, with chains dropped around their ankles, although sometimes that might happen. There's three basic, for art at least, this exists in literature as well, but for paintings, for pictures, three major themes grow out of Romanticism. And we're starting to see some of them here already. One of them is the power of nature. Nature is more powerful than man. The works of man, which attempt to control nature, simply cannot. Right? So again, freedom versus constraint. Right? The power of nature supersedes any attempt to constrain it. Second thing we see a lot of is death. Death is the ultimate freedom from constraint. Right? Work's done. Death is where there is no more duty. You're done. So images of death are where you've given up on the constraints of mortality. And the third thing we see a lot of is images of dreams. And I guess what goes hand in hand with dreams are images of insanity. Because this is where rationality, right? Reason, the things that might constrain us, let go. When you're crazy. When you're dreaming. Right? Your mind is freer to wander. So what we'll look at with Romanticism and how these three themes sort of overlap each other in a number of different ways. Right? Power of nature, the themes of death, and dreams and insanity. Right? So, we're already beginning to see them here. The power of nature with Watson and the shark. The shark beginning to devour Watson. They're not going to be able to stop the shark. They can just get Watson out of its grip. Even though we have the harbor in Havana, in Cuba, our attempts to sort of control nature. Nature comes back in again, right? We have colonized, if you will. We have built up the harbor to do what we want, but nature is still there. Right? On the right, this is not the best example for something really romantic here, but certainly the idea of a sort of championing death as something that's a martyrdom for the good of all can be brought a bit into that, sort of focusing on death as the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate giving up of now all your responsibilities for the good of everyone. These will become clearer as we look at pictures that are more firmly associated with Romanticism. So our first one here is Francisco Goya. He's in Spain. We haven't looked at really any Spanish art. No, we looked at Velázquez, right? We looked at very little Spanish art up to this point. But Goya is in Spain during a very horrific time. And as you can see, this is actually a really nice comparison side by side, because both of them are about sacrifices in war, but both of them are about martyrdom. But the more romantic image by Goya is significantly more horrifying. It's darker, not only in the sky that takes place under the cover of darkness at night, lit only by that box light that you see in front of the soldiers, but it's darker in mood as well. The trauma, the people who are dying are suffering, whereas General Wolfe looks to the heavens, almost like he's fainted for his actions. Our people here are slaughtered, or are about to be. And Goya, this is a pretty large picture, 11 feet across, so it's almost as big as our screen, right? The entire screen. Goya shows soldiers on the right slaughtering civilians on the left, which is itself a fairly horrific scene. And it's something that Goya himself probably witnessed. It's a recent news event. You can see by the date, right? The title, the 3rd of May in 1808, and painted 6 years later, in 1814. Right? What makes this more romantic than anything we've seen before is the focus on gore and on death. This is a queasy class. There might be some times when you want to look down because things that we have to see on screen are kind of horrific. And this is one of them. Goya focuses in this scene of martyrdom on the martyred bodies, this pile of slain victims. And it gives you the sense that the people marching up the hill are just going to add to that pile again and again as they're shot. And the blood that we see soaking the ground here, all these bodies have already left their blood out of his head even, up against the white of that guy's shirt. You know, you get the sense that in a second it's just going to explode in a sort of Quentin Tarantino fashion, you know, which is blood everywhere from the soldiers at the right. And they, seen from the back, really couldn't care less. They're the mechanized structures of war. Okay. So we see them in lockstep. You'll notice the first 3 are in the exact same position, kind of like the sons in that David picture that we saw. But not for honor, but rather to carry out evil duties. Right? The murder of these civilians. Goya lines up everybody to be shot and focuses on the horror on their faces. One man pleads for his salvation. Of course, he's not going to get it, but by putting his arms up to the sides, we're meant to think about Christ, and that he is an innocent martyr. The white shirt certainly adds to that. The fact that immediately next to him here is a monk with his head shaved on top in a tonsure adds to the idea that these people are perfectly innocent and are just being killed as part of war. So it's a terribly horrifying scene. And the focus on suffering, the focus on death, and the focus on blood and gore are things that we're going to see again and again in romantic paintings, in romanticism. Right. Now, what's going on in this picture? We actually can put this into a historical context. What happened on the 3rd of May in 1808? What's the source of that title? Well, we have to know a little bit about Spanish history. In 1808, the Spanish revolted against the king. Sort of inspired by American Revolution, French Revolution, 20 years after the French Revolution or so, the Spanish had a revolution against their king, Carlos IV of Spain. Goya had been his court painter, the official portraitist at the court of Carlos IV. We have quite a few portraits from that court, and here's one from the group, from his shop. He probably worked on parts of it only. Down at the National Gallery, showing Carlos, who didn't seem to mind looking kind of stupid in his portraits. It wasn't particularly cleaned up by Goya. Okay. Well, Spanish uprising, 1808, right? This is kind of a major bit of history. At that point, 1808, Napoleon is the Emperor of France. And if you know your geography at all, France and Spain are right next to each other, right? There's only between them is the Pyrenees. Now, okay, and many sort of connections between these two cultures going back, right? They'll go in a second, maybe. Okay, 1808, the Spanish rise against Carlos. Napoleon intervenes. Napoleon tells Carlos, hey, come to France, I'll give you asylum. You know, and I'll send my troops in, and they'll quash the rebellion. And then you can go back and everything will be fine. Right? How's that? I'm here to help. And Carlos thinks this is a great idea. So he goes right across the Pyrenees, just to the other side, in front of Paris, which is literally just on the other side of the Pyrenees, right on the coast. And Napoleon has him arrested. With the family, has them locked up. Right? And Napoleon then appoints his own brother, Joseph Bonaparte, to be the new king of Spain. Right? So this is another one of those coups where Napoleon is going to take over. So he takes advantage of the uprising against Carlos to extend the empire. Right? So his brother is now in charge from 1808 onward. Right? During this period, this is where Goya becomes a kind of interesting character. During the period of French occupation, which is 1808 to 1813, 5 years, right? Goya goes to work for the French. He has been a court painter to Carlos before. And with the French occupation, he begins immediately to work for the French who have moved into Spain. So our little portrait, king, right, at the National Gallery by Goya, of Victor Goya, he is part of Joseph Bonaparte's inner circle. In fact, the clothing that he's wearing is of a young soldier in training for the French. Right? Goya doesn't care about politics. Goya is going to shift as the winds shift. And he begins to immediately work for the French while they're occupying Spain. This, of course, is not going to last. Right? In 1813, the British troops under Wellington move in and drive Joseph Bonaparte out of Spain. They restore Carlos' son, Ferdinand, to the Spanish throne. This is the beginning of the end for Napoleon. Right? This is the beginning of the push that will end in 1815 at the Battle of Waterloo in Belgium. Right? The defeat of Napoleon. Because he pushed himself too far. So, after 1813, when the Spanish throne is restored, Goya has got some explaining to do. He'd been working for the French. And there were people that questioned his patriotism. And he asked if he could please prove to the Spanish government that he was as patriotic as the next guy. And he requested to paint memorials to the battle, to the uprising, to the Spanish spirit in the face of the French onslaught. And that's what this picture was. Right? A testament to the spirit of Spain. So the soldiers that we see are the forces of Napoleon. Mercenary soldiers brought in to fight against the Spanish who are innocent of any crime. And this is painted propaganda as a way, right? In that it's meant to sway you to think a very particular way. And it's one of two pictures he painted. Each huge. The 2nd of May and the 3rd of May. The 2nd of May showing the storming of the city of Madrid, the valiant fight by the Spanish against the mercenary troops. They brought in Turkish soldiers for hire to fight. The people who were not killed in the battle were rounded up in the middle of the night and summarily shot. Right? These are the works that are going to now square Goya with the new Spanish government to show that he was not on the side of the French at all. And he makes them out to be demons in this interchange. Some nice details here. There's our troops standing in lockstep. Behind the hats of Napoleonic soldiers, those tall, look like top hats almost. We can also see the anguish of the faces as you get the sense that the group that's being killed, that the line of people just goes on and on, right? We see the figures coming up the hill. So then as you trace it, right, back over through here, you can see that that line of people goes back and back and back, as if to say that there are people everywhere to be shot. And they go all the way back to the gate of a church in the middle of the night, as if to say there is no sanctuary from this whatsoever. Right? It's a very, very powerful picture about the horrors of war, which is something that Goya witnessed firsthand during the French occupation. Now, while he was working for the French, and before he had the chance to sort of right himself with Spanish, Goya was also doing a series of works in private that he never published. And it was a series of prints that he was doing on the horrors of war. If you're squeamish, now is your warning. They're pretty horrific things. Right? Did a whole series of prints, the disasters of war, that were meant to be very sarcastic, great heroism with dead men, right? Of the things that he had seen walking around Spain during the French occupation. This is perhaps the most horrific of them all, but there are other images of people being dragged off to the dark corners of cities for goodness knows what. Right? He never printed these. He never published them. These are etchings, like what we saw with Rembrandt, but they were never published during his lifetime. He was just sort of recording what he had seen. So he'd been sympathetic all along to what he saw his country going through during this time. This brings up something that is an important part of talking about romantic art, romanticism, and that's this focus on gore and death. One of the aesthetic concepts that came up during the Romantic period, already at the end of the 1790s or so, was the idea of sublime beauty. It's a different idea about what beauty is. We use the word sublime inappropriately, loosely anymore. We talk about, that meal was so good, the raspberries were just surprising. But that's not what it means. It's from a particular school of thought that says that any kind of visual response, right, from a work of art, any visual response is good. Right? It doesn't matter what inspires it. What matters is that you have a response. So strong visual response is what a visual artist should aim for. And sublime was the term that was coined for those images that cause the deepest, most searing kind of visual reaction on the part of the viewer. And this led to images that were particularly memorable. Usually images of great violence that are very, very hard to forget. This is probably true anymore. If you think about news reports, right? The child laying on the beach in Greece. Things that are horrifying, but they're impossible to forget. That's a sublime kind of beauty. We don't think of it as beautiful, but that's how it was written up in aesthetic manuals as a kind of beauty that inspires a reaction that isn't necessarily beautiful. Light and wonderful and lighthearted, but in fact is intended to hit you in the gut, intended to be that much more memorable. And these works by Goya are prime examples of an artist trying to work in a style that is sublime. Not beautiful, but not forgettable. And that feeds part of Romanticism, are images, passages, and books that drag you in an incredibly personal and deep way. So even if you don't like either of these pictures, the one on the right is very, very difficult to look at. It's the sort of thing you can never forget. That's what sublime is. Unforgettable aesthetic experience. So, Goya is presenting to us this new movement, this idea of the sublime in art, the focus on death and suffering as a theme that is much more dark, right? But again, what does death eventually achieve for us? Right? We're freed from the shackles. We're freed from the constraints of life, which is what tied it into this Enlightenment philosophy of Romanticism. Back in France, a little bit later, right, 5 or so years later, we see more of this interest in the sublime. We're going to see a lot of dead people today. This is a shipwreck scene. The Medusa was a ship that wrecked, right? That's the name of the ship. And it went down into the sea. The hull broke up in the storm. 150 survivors took what was left of the hull and were able to sort of strap it together to make a raft, right? Where they were able to survive for a number of days, right? 12 days. Right? And of the 150 that originally survived the shipwreck, at the end of 12 days, only 15 were left. So what Theodore Géricault is showing us here is the very end of this trauma, where they're struggling to survive, and the bodies of the dead are laying in the foreground. The waves of the ocean threaten to crash over the top of the raft. They're trying against all odds to flag down a tiny little ship on the horizon. I have a detail of it. You'll see it in just a second. But you'll notice that with this sort of titanic struggle of mankind against the forces of nature, the foreground of this picture is front-loaded, so to speak, right? with dead and dying bodies. Everywhere we look, again, it's sublime beauty, the sublime beauty of human suffering. And so here's a few details of the boat itself, and you can see the figures posed about. It's almost like news reporting. The shipwreck had only happened a few years earlier, 1816. So it's a relatively new event. But of course, Géricault didn't see it. What he did was read an account by 2 of the survivors, which was published in newspapers, and everybody read it as it was published in serial form in the newspapers. And from that account comes up with this visual version of the death of the majority of the people on the Medusa. So the foreground is just simply covered with dead bodies. They take up the majority of our visual experience as we move our way eventually to the heroic figure trying to flag down the boat. Here a figure holds on. We think a father with his son trying to keep him on the boat. As you might imagine, others have probably been partly eaten by fish, and the paleness of the bodies adds to that sort of horror. In the background, you can see the wave breaking up. Again, the power of nature, a theme that we've been talking about, is being part of romanticism, in addition to this focus on sort of darker themes, sublime themes. Those both come into play in this picture. At the same time, it's almost about the triumph of the human spirit from all of this. We have at the apex the group of people coming together to raise this one person higher, right? He's standing on the shoulders of everybody as they push him up, because they have to flag that boat down. They've got to get themselves seen over the top of these waves, and they're hoping against all hope that boat on the horizon will see them. And the futility of it, right, the seeming futility of it, the miracle of their saving, is brought forth by the tininess of that boat. Géricault was a very progressive thinker. This was a period when slavery was rampant everywhere. England was just barely beginning to make moves to stop slave trading, and he makes the hero of the piece someone of African descent, which is very forward-looking for Géricault at the time. There's a close-up of the boat, and you can see the sense that this is just absolutely lost. We can barely see the boat. How can the boat possibly see them, right? But eventually it does, and we know that because the newspaper accounts have been published. We know what's going to happen. And when they're finally rescued, this serialized account, right, it came out in installations in the newspaper day after day after day, told the story of how the shipwreck happened because the captain was incompetent. didn't know how to maneuver the ship in a storm, and how when they got together on the raft, let's go back. When they got together on the raft, instead of binding together as a unit to all survive as one, there was numerous instances of infighting, of mutineering. There were even instances of cannibalism in order to stay alive for these 12 days at sea, where they would eat the dead in order to remain alive. And again, this inspired this sort of romantic interest in this incredibly dark narrative that eventually ends in something positive, but certainly at this point seems as bleak as can possibly be. And I think the man with the red cowl holding his dead son gives me the sense of how people must have felt on the raft at that point. That salvation ain't coming. Well, again, not for the squeamish, right? Jericho paints this massive picture in his studio, and he wants to get himself in the right mood. And so he went to the local medical school, and he got body parts and brought them into the studio, not only to use them to paint the different bodies, but also he wanted just to be in the proper mood of things. And so he got decapitated heads, severed limbs, brought them into a studio. The neighbors upstairs complained about the stench. And it was all to get him in that proper sublime kind of mood. I'm not going to leave this up there very long. He's making a statement with this. It's a massive picture, right? This gives you a sense of just how big this picture is, right? The figures are about twice life size, right? And he is definitely trying to make a statement with this. This was a salon picture. It's going to the salon of 1819. And what's the statement he's trying to make? Certainly part of it is this romantic philosophical statement about the human spirit surviving against the power of nature, against all odds, how we are capable of great horrors en route to that, and maybe the play between the horrific side and the heroic side. That's part of it. The other part of it is totally political. Absolutely political. And this we need a little refresher course on French history. Okay? We've already talked about Napoleon, right? So we got the French Revolution in 1789, right? And that led to a republic. Right? That lasted all the way until 1804. And in the meantime, encountered quite a few problems because they were cutting people's heads off. Right? In 1804, one of the heroes of the revolution, Napoleon, was crowned emperor. Right? So the revolution of 1789, Napoleon is crowned emperor in 1804. Okay? He remains emperor until 1815. At which point he's overthrown by the British. And France's first experiment in democracy comes to an end, even though arguably came to an end in 1804 when Napoleon crowned himself. Right? In 1815, after Napoleon is driven from power, France decides to go back to the monarchy. So from 1815 to 1830 is a period we call the Restoration. Not to be confused with the Restoration in America, which is after the Civil War. Right? This is the restored French monarchy. Right? We go back to a distant relative of Louis XV. That's correct. Right? The restoration of the monarchy. 1815. So Erasmus of Medusa is painted in the aftermath of Napoleon. That's why I've got it on the screen. And during the period of the Restoration. Right? The French kings have been restored to the throne. Okay? So, Napoleon defeated at Waterloo, 1815. 1815, 1830, the Restoration. The first king of the Restoration, the king during the time of Jericho's painting, is King Louis XVIII. Okay? Louis XVIII had actually appointed the captain of the Medusa. He was a friend of his with very little seafaring experience. He was the one responsible for wrecking the ship off the coast of Senegal. Right? When this account came out in 1819, 4 years into Louis XVIII's reign, a group of progressive, what would you call them? They're anti-royalists, right? Not everybody wants them. When they kind of politically, you know for a fact, you know this, what, and here's the other. Not everybody wants the outcome of what happens politically, right? It's going to decide that support and resist, right? And in 1815, with the Restoration, there's a group of people that are known as anti-royalists. They want nothing to do with the idea of returning to the king. They want to get back to the ideals of the revolution, right? They want to, Napoleon screwed that up for them. They want to get back to the ideals of the revolution, which were, liberty, equality, brotherhood, right? One of these anti-royalists is Jericho. And this is intended as an anti-royalist painting, picking up on what everybody saw as a fault of the French monarchy, to care. That by appointing this friend to be the captain of his son, what Louis XVIII has done is put personal interest ahead of the group. Right? Necessary. He put personal interest ahead of the good of the people. And by doing so, there was this tragedy that Jericho was taking a monumental portion. And it was intended as and taken as an anti-royalist state. The king's court. And it's not innocuous. Right? It has real-world repercussions. So there's a huge scandal in 1819 when it's shown. Because as you might imagine, the pro-royalists, all the way to the king, have to understand what's going on, right? As a political picture. And it goes back to what I said at the very beginning when we were looking at Jacques Zadig, the owner of the sons of the property, right? Is that there are talking about artists who are using art to engage with society. Not just to make pretty pictures, or granted there's some things that aren't particularly pretty, right? But not to just make pictures for the elite, but rather to be socially conscious of what they do. To make works of art that might alter people's thinking. To use their talent for good. And that's what we haven't ever talked about prior to the Jacques Zadig. Is this idea that art can do something like that. Instead, it's just a question of theology, right? It's never really tried to affect social change. And that's what we're seeing in the Romantic period, a little bit in the Neoclassical period, and we'll see as a strong component of art coming forward from here. Now, I've always thought that Jericho saw this. This was in England. Jericho hadn't been to England yet. He goes in 1820, but he hadn't been there yet. At the same time, this was known through engraved copies. And there's just so much similar here. African descended, a hero of African descent, at the apex of the triangle, right? A fight against the forces of nature, the overcrowded boat, and so forth and so on. That company's way ahead of the game. People talk about Jericho as being one of the first works to show a contemporary news event But that's not really true, right? Copley's way out ahead of it here. Well, in 1830, the anti-royalists get what they want. The Second Revolution, the July Revolution of 1830. France will eventually have three different revolutions, right? The first one with the Marseillaise, the one that we're most familiar with, is just the first of the three. In 1830, the Second Revolution overthrows Louis's successor, Charles X, and establishes a new representative form of government. They're going to give it a second shot, right? The anti-royalists get their go-ahead. Eugène Delacroix was also an anti-royalist. And in the immediate aftermath of the July Revolution for the Salon that fall, he paints an allegorical picture of France rising up together to fight for the good of the community. Again, a massive picture. He was a pupil of Géricault. He actually posed in the studio with those cadavers while he was painting the raft of the Medusa. Some people suggest he might be one of the figures in the jumble in there, right? Moves out to be his own prominent romantic painter. Image is Paris bonding together across social boundaries. If we look into the distance, we even see Napoleon's generals coming together. Or not Napoleon, but rather French army generals coming together. A man with a top hat along with an African, binding together a kid at the foreground, building the barricades out of the cobbles, wearing a hat he found of a public servant, seeming to enjoy only too much the fact that he's finally got his hands on a sword. But the basic theme is that France is going to bond together to fight for the good of the country. Again, it's very romantic. First we've got these sort of street urchins on either side, framed by two kids taking up arms, being led forward. The woman is their inspiration. She's not really there, right? She's very much like the figures that we've seen in pictures of Titian or by Poussin, where we've seen embodiments of ideas, embodiments of concepts, instead of real people. She is the cry in their heart. She is Lady Liberty. And we know this for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, her wardrobe malfunction should be a tip in itself, right? She's not marching around the battlefield really with her breasts out. This is because liberty nurtures us all. So we get to see her breasts as mothering figure. It's not meant to be sexy. Second, she's carrying the flag, right? The Bleu Blanc Rouge of France. Third, she's wearing a hat that comes from Delacroix's study of ancient Greek art. That is a hat that was worn by freed slaves in ancient Greece. All of this comes together to make her a personification. She is France itself. Right? The idea of liberty, leading the people. Now, all of that said, with the smoke of battle rising behind them, you can see quite clearly that it's a very romanticized picture as well. It still has sublime elements with dead bodies piled up in the foreground, blocking our visual entrance into the image. A figure on the left that looks kind of like something off of the raft of the Medusa, lying there, his head bludgeoned, naked, half naked, amid the ruins of France. Two soldiers in the lower right corner also bloodied and left for dead. So again, Romanticism is bringing out these sort of darker images as part of what makes them romantic. bringing them into other images that have hope, but at the same time, sort of so much blood and gore and death that sets it apart from what we've been seeing before. Okay, we have more Romanticism on Thursday. We're going to pick up the pace a bit. We'll have to, because we only got like 3 weeks left, right? So we'll talk more about deadlines and whatnot. Remember that today's the deadline for your annotated bibliographies, right? I need to see those so I can help. So give those to me. Yeah, I'll see you soon.